What is up, YouTube? Thanks for stopping by the channel. Today we are going to pull the turbo. I've developed a slow oil leak and I have traced it back up to what I believe to be the oil return tube from the turbo that goes back into the block. That's a pretty typical problem. They're finicky to get sealed right, so we got to pull the turbo, replace that seal, and check anything else back there we can while the turbo's out, and go from there. So hopefully we can get all the bolts out without breaking or stripping any of them. Fingers crossed. Well, let's get after it. So first things first, you can see that I pulled my grill. You don't have to do that, obviously. I pulled it because I don't have a creeper that I can lay over the engine bay. Unfortunately, I would kill to have one of those right now, but I don't. So what I do is I pull the grill and I just kind of kneel down on the top of the bumper right here. First things first, just gonna get a few things out of the way. Coolant tube that goes to the turbo, this right here, comes off this metal tube. You can disconnect it here or up there. I'll probably disconnect it here just so I have more out of the way. So we're gonna take that off. I'm gonna disconnect the hot side intercooler tubing right there. Kind of get that pushed out of the way as much as possible. And just those two band clamps right there, 11 mil, both of them, or 7/16, I believe it is, will work as well. Sensor right here, just lift up on the tab, pull it back, it'll unplug just like that. Also what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull the PCV hose right here, goes all the way across. We're gonna disconnect one side, just a hose clamp, and route that out of the way. So then we can move our wiring harness a little bit out of the way and get to the turbo inlet bolts right there, and we'll go from there. So I'm gonna get that started and we'll get rolling. So I know I said I was going to take off the inlet horn on the turbo. I don't think I really need to, quite honestly, at least not at this point. For some reason I can't get it out, then I'll take it off at that point. But I think I can get it out without having to unbolt those. So I'm going to leave that on. This is my first time pulling the turbo while it's in the truck. Obviously I pulled it off the motor after I pulled the motor, but it's about 500 times easier to do it when the motor's out of the truck or you lift the cab. But unfortunately, we don't have a car lift yet. So we gotta do it this way. All right, so if you guys can see right there, that is I believe it's an 18 millimeter bolt, if I remember correctly. It's been a minute, so I'll let you know for sure after I pull it off. But there's that one there. There's another one right there. You can see right down there. And then there is another one on the other side. Seems like there's just three, if I remember correctly, right there. My camera will focus. Right down there in the bottom. So that's actually the easy part. We have to pull the downpipe off, get all those bolts out. Let's see, I believe there's 5 or 6 that hold that sucker on there. And they're usually pretty nasty. So we're gonna get some PB Blaster and we're gonna soak all those bolts and let them sit a minute. I tell you, PB Blaster is definitely the best stuff I've found for helping on exhaust bolts and just bolts that are seized up and hard to get out in general. Good stuff. WD-40 works decent. But PB Blaster really does the job. So we're gonna soak all the bolts on the downpipe, all the bolts on the both up pipes. Let me see if I can get back here. The dreaded 12.12 mil right there. You see one of them. There's 3 on each one. So we're gonna soak those. Hopefully we can get them out without stripping or breaking any bolts. If I get into any that are just being really stubborn, then I'll get the blowtorch out, heat them up. What that does is that expands and shrinks the metal to kind of break it loose of itself, if that makes sense. So hopefully we won't have to do that, but if we have to, I'm not afraid to do it. Not the most fun job in the world, but it's doable and we're gonna do it, so let's go. Finally got this massive downpipe out. Yes, this is an aftermarket downpipe, like I said in my walk around. So it's a bit bigger than the factory and it's definitely harder to get out. But got it out. Needless to say, you absolutely have to unbolt the transmission dipstick tube from the bell housing to get enough slack to move it to get this sucker out of the way. Very tight fit. And I was able to get it up through the top. I don't know if you guys can see that in the time lapse, but I got it up through the top of the motor instead of down. There's no way for me to get it down, so got it. Now let's move on to the up pipes. Able to get the driver's side up pipe disconnected from the turbo. The passenger side, however, had a strip bolt that I had forgotten about last time, so I went ahead down below and disconnected the up pipe from the manifold. I should be able to pull the whole thing out while it's attached to the turbo. I got that disconnected. Driver's side is disconnected from up top. I have the 3 pedestal bolts out of the turbo. Next, I'm going to take off the oil supply to the turbo right there, and then the oil drain tube, which is way under there, which is gonna be a pain in the butt. And let me tell you guys, if you have access to an air ratchet, that is gonna make your life so much easier on this job. This is an Air Cat. It's I believe it's rated at about either 100 or 110 foot-pounds. Which is pretty good for an air ratchet, in my opinion. But let me tell you, between that and the PB Blaster, it is just amazing. I mean, I've done this before. Even though it's out of the motor, I did it by hand before, and it sucks. So having an air ratchet, especially while it's in the truck, is a huge help. And just so y'all know, those pedestal bolts are 17 millimeter. The oil drain tube, where it goes back into the block, is underneath the 2 up pipes, more underneath the driver's side up pipe where it comes into the turbo. You can actually see there's a nut on a stud right down there, right there. That's the driver's side. There's another one to the left, about 2.5 inches over. I just stuck my hand down there, and the one on the left was completely loose. I mean, it's backed off probably a turn and a half, at least. That was definitely where the oil leak's coming from. So I'm gonna get that other one pulled off and pull the turbo and check the seal and see what else we can see once we get it out of there. All right, I got the driver's side nut removed. It was snug, not really tight, quite honestly, but it was snug, but it was pretty easy to break loose. These are 12 millimeter nuts. The left side You could probably get a socket on the right side. I used an open end of a 12mm wrench, and it broke loose pretty easy. So hopefully we should be able to pull this whole assembly out right now. That was a pain in the butt, y'all. So finally got everything out. I actually had to take the driver's side up pipe all the way off and out of the way. Right there where those two studs are is where the oil drain tube from the turbo goes back into the back casing there. And as you can see, the bell housing sits above it, so you can't just unbolt it and slide it back. One, for the studs, two, because of the bell housing. Even once you get it up above the studs, it'll still hit that bell housing, so you can't slide it backwards. What I actually had to do is separate the cold and hot side of the turbo. I'll show you that in just a second, just to get everything out of there in two pieces. And I know what you're thinking, well, how the crap are you going to do that, getting it back together? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the strip bolt from the downpipe, or excuse me, from the up pipe on the passenger side, and get replacement bolts, and so I can reassemble that after the turbo is put in by itself. So that being said, this was definitely leaking oil, and I'll tell you guys, this is the scary part. It just so happens while this was leaking, I was driving back from hunting the other day, and the O-ring on the thermostat housing up here, this metal crossover tube, it just has an O-ring and a bolt that seals it off. Anyways, it blew that seal, so all the coolant was coming out of there, and it started leaking little by little. I didn't even realize it, but started leaking out of there, and of course it goes straight down in the valley. Well, what it does is it's going to fill up the valley full of water, run over this ledge right here, and right into that little sinkhole. It's literally just a sinkhole that will hold water right around the mounting point for the oil return tube from the turbo. So with this already leaking oil and this one side being completely loose, that water was just seeping right into my oil. So when I checked my oil yesterday, it was milky, which is not a good thing. If you find milky oil, you've got to figure out what is causing it and figure it out fast. Do not drive it once you find water in the oil. Not a good idea. And of course, I was about to freak out because this is a brand new motor. I was thinking, man, if I freaking trashed, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars, I'm going to be extremely upset. But luckily, I caught it in time. There wasn't too much water. You can see the oil that's sitting around there. It is, you know, typical oil. It looks dirty because of the grime around it, but it's actually pretty clean oil. But there was water in, and I could see it from the dipstick tube, because basically it just kind of steams up in there and creates most of the milky oil actually up in the tube and under your oil cap. I caught that, so thank goodness I did in time and didn't run it forever without checking the oil. That's just one good reason, guys, to keep an eye on your oil, even if, you know, I don't care. I mean, like I said, this is a brand new motor. You know, this shouldn't have happened, but it did, and you guys are always going to run into small things like this. And of course, this could have been a very big deal, but luckily I caught it in time. So these are the two halves of the turbo when you split it apart. You got the cold side, the exhaust turbine, and the hot side housing, and then back here is where your downpipe bolts onto. And this sucker right here, as you can see, the 12 point is stripped out. So I'm probably going to weld a larger nut on there and break it loose and replace that bolt. Looks like this one's good. This one over here is stripped out as well. So I'll extract those Actually, welding a nut on there does two things. One, obviously gives you something to grip onto, and two, it heats the entire bolt up, which breaks it loose if it's seized up, which is most likely why it's stripped. So that's just a really good way to do it if you can have access. Of course, since I have it out of the truck, it would be a piece of cake. So you got your oil inlet right there. This is your oil drain tube, and this is what was leaking under here. So, but as you guys can see, even though as dirty as my hands are, you can tell it's still clean oil. It didn't get too contaminated with water entirely, so thank goodness for that. Looks like it might have been leaking just a little bit on the seal here, so I'll probably go ahead and replace the seal on where it connects into the turbo as well, since I already have it out. No sense in leaving. It doesn't look like it really leaks too much, but there's enough grime to tell me that it probably does seep just a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and fix that and get a new seal for the side as well. So that's what it is. Now it's a split apart, the two halves, if you ever have to do that. It's basically an exhaust clamp, a band clamp right here, and it goes around. So you have this half and you have this half, and you can see the groove on each side where the band clamps around both of them together, and you tighten it up. So what you have to do is you have to break that loose. It is a 10mm nut, and it's basically a little carriage bolt that sits in one side. As you can see, that side is square. So basically it sits in there. You just have to loosen that 10mm bolt. That's all that holds it pretty much. It is a pretty tight fit in there, especially if it's been on a while. So you might have to tap it with a hammer. And there is a gasket, exhaust gasket, that goes around here. So if you do break it apart, make sure you replace that. The other thing you have to do is the rod that connects to your wastegate right here. As you can see, that's your wastegate. Connects right here. And all there is that holds it in place, it'll be pushed in from the back, from the inner side. And there's a little snap ring that holds it in place. So do not lose that. I mean, you can get replacement snap rings, but you know, why replace it if you don't have to? So don't lose that, because those suckers will fly across the room and be gone forever. Now I need to get the new seals and gaskets, put the turbo back together, and start the reassembly, which is gonna be the fun part. Let's go ahead and extract these stripped out bolts right here. Got my ESOB Rebel 215 set up. Freaking love this welder. Multi-process, MIG-TIG stick, spool MIG aluminum. Does everything except TIG aluminum, and ESOB actually makes the same machine now that does TIG aluminum as well as everything else, which I cannot wait to get my hands on that, especially for boat fabrication. So, but what we're doing is we're just, like I said, we're tacking these nuts on here, heat it up, and give us something to break it loose with. So let's tack those in. Woo! Thing is hot. And just like that, we're free. All right guys, so now that we got those bolts out, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take a wire wheel and clean up the mounting surface to pretty much everything on the hot side of the turbo, on the oil drain tube, and on the up pipes and downpipe. Clean up all the mating surfaces. You don't want to let any grime or any soot or anything get sandwiched in between there when you put your gaskets on, because trust me, exhaust leaks are annoying and I hate them. So I'm gonna take every precaution to avoid that. As you can see, I have all new gaskets. Here's the oil tube return gaskets. I put those on. Got a little bit of ultra gray, which is my most recommended gasket for sure. Liquid gasket, that is. Silicone. Awesome stuff, can't go wrong with it. I've used it on literally everything and it is just great by Permatex. Got everything ready, gonna get all the mating surfaces cleaned up. And on the up pipes, I do not have the heat shields, and I'm not gonna be putting the heat shields back on. And eventually I'll be getting, or possibly making, aftermarket, or should I say just larger up pipes to increase airflow, probably whenever I change the turbo. But for now, I'm not gonna be putting the heat shields back on, but what I am going to do is all these tabs that are sticking out that the heat shield originally mounts to, I'm going to cut those off and polish down the welds. Honestly, mainly just to get them out of the way for ease of installment. I mean, and it'll look cleaner, but I mean, nobody's gonna see it. So mainly for ease of installment. So I'm gonna get rid of those, and it really will help putting it back in because they kept getting snagged on literally everything when I was trying to get them out. So that'll make that easier. Let's get to cleaning. Now that we got all of our mating surfaces cleaned up, nice and shiny, so right now is a good time to inspect your turbo a little bit and see how much play there is. If you guys can hear that. There's just a little bit of play. Actually, when it comes to turbo, that's actually a pretty good amount of play. You can even see the fins moving closer and farther away from the sides. And if I push it to one side, just barely, you can hear it drag. So what that means is this turbo has seen better days. We'll have to do something about that pretty soon, but not today. That'll be to come, so stay tuned for that. Leave in the comments what you guys think I should do, and if you have any suggestions on a turbo or a rebuild kit and why. Now it's time to reinstall every little piece. All right guys, so now that we got a little bit better light, y'all can actually see what the heck's going on here. So if you look real close, you got 1, 2, 3. That's your pedestal mounts right there. That's where your turbo pedestal bolts down to the block. There's the block end of your oil feed line, and then here's the turbo end. It goes on top of the turbo. Right there, that's the problem child right there. That is the return to the case end of the oil return tube. As you can see, it's literally like a hole right there. This is up higher, like this is the top of the stud. It's even higher than the top of these studs. So it sits, you know, about 1.25 inches lower, the mounting surface does. And the block sits higher than this mounting surface. And then this case piece sits higher as well. And it kind of drops off down here. But this area right here is literally the perfect spot just to hold water. And when I had that coolant leak, it was flowing right down the valley of the motor and falling right here and just like puddling here. Like I could just imagine there's just a constant puddle here. And the nut that was on this stud right here, that was the one that was backed off like, I mean, probably 2 full turns. I mean, it was super loose. I just reached behind underneath the up pipe and just took it off with my fingers, super loose. And it was very obvious it was leaking oil pretty good there. So that was definitely where my oil leak was coming from. And that's definitely where the water was getting in. So I got that all cleaned up. And really, cleanliness is the best policy when you're doing any work on an engine. Don't leave anything dirty. When you're putting it back together, take the time. Doesn't matter how much time it takes, get it clean, super clean. Get it grease free, use brake cleaner. Brake cleaner is good because it evaporates with really no residue at all. So it's great for cleaning things, for getting it ready for silicone, liquid gasket, and just to have a clean surface for your paper gaskets and rubber gaskets as well. So great parts cleaner. So get it clean. I cannot stress that enough. So that's the lowdown of where the turbo sits. Of course, you got your up pipes that come in from both sides, and then your downpipe sits on top, and it takes up a lot of space behind there. With the turbo out, you're like, man, that's a heck of a lot of space down there. But once you get the turbo in, you realize how quickly it dwindles. And but we're gonna get it all put back together. It's not gonna be that big a deal, especially since I can put just the turbo in by itself, and then each up pipe individually, and then the downpipe. So it won't be that bad, quite honestly. So that's what we're gonna do. That's all it takes to put it back together, guys. Just a little over a minute. That's all it took. I'm just kidding, that was a nightmare. No, in all honesty, it's really not that bad, guys. It's really more time consuming than anything. The biggest thing is just to not get in too big of a hurry. Just take your time, make sure you remember where everything goes, how everything goes. And I showed you step by step how to take everything apart. It's just reverse order to put it all back together. Like I said before, just make sure everything's clean. Make sure your gaskets are seated right. Make sure everything's in order, and make sure you don't skip any steps. That'll give you guys a pretty good idea of what it takes to pull the turbo, whether you're replacing it, rebuilding it, or fixing a simple oil leak like I had to do. So now we're just gonna go through, change the oil, start it up, let it idle, let it warm up, thoroughly check for any oil leaks, which I think I pretty well got it taken care of, so we shouldn't have any issues, but we're gonna go ahead and do that right now. Well, that is gonna be it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, like, comment. Thanks again, guys, for your support. Have a great day.